All right, folks, we are ready for another CIRF report. This one for the last couple of days in March 2023 into April the 5th. That includes, obviously, April Fool's Day. And it looks like we're going to have a lot of mental pressure and then cap off the week with a full moon in Libra, hence bringing on this yearning for a lot of justice. Let's go surfing. And I do have some surprises towards the end of this video. And I also wanted to point out the current astrology, what's happening right now, just so you know, in case you're interested. I'm looking at Saturn making its way to the midheaven as we speak on March 29th at 10:22 a.m. So, what do we have in the collective unconscious? What do we have in the I-Ching and the astrology? This is going to be what we're going to talk about the first half of our session of our show. Last half, we're going to triangulate again for the solution. And that's where I've got the surprise in the final slideshow, an added bonus to these reports, hopefully, if it works. All right. So for our influence, starting with the astrology, that's the magenta circle. There's a lot happening there. We have Mars has quite a few aspects. Remember, Mars and Pluto has already switched signs into a fall position. So we can say that power is currently falling. We also have Mercury has quite a few alignments. And one of those is very strong in the collective unconscious. That's the Mercury and Pluto. So Mercury doing a little overhaul, and it's a square in between. So it's not an easy overhaul. It's a hard, pressured, it's this pressure to change, pressure to morph, pressure. It looks like mentality, rational is gone. That is very appropriate, isn't it? Well, we thought that for the entire couple of years now. That phenomenon of just the loss of logic in this world is going to go on hyperdrive this week. And that's going to make a lot of mental pressure. Then we have the full moon in Libra, caused by the sun in Aries, shining over to Libra for a really cool full moon display in Libra. So land of balance and justice and peace and harmony and beauty. So that'll be a big one. All of this, though, is covered by the I-Ching that says conflict, and it's not one in particular. I mean, you could point to Mercury square Pluto. There are some other squares that are really important that we will talk about. That represents some conflict. But you also have the full moon, which I'll describe all this. But you put it all together, it adds to a perfect resemblance of what's happening, perfect summary of what's happening in the astrology. And then the dream bot is a little bit different. We're going to talk about that first, but mainly about Mercury. It's pointing to communication and somewhat of initiating what? And we have some linguistics that might be of interest to you. And with that, I think that's our sufficient summary. Very high congruency score. Overall, the energy is about mental pressure. And it includes strain, it includes internal conflict, logic, inconsistencies, but above all, transformation. And so it's at Mercury square Pluto. And let's go ahead and get started. And if you have not subscribed, make sure you do that now. I want to give a big shout out to all the comments, the extraordinary comments based on up arrows. It was a 4-way tie for our best comment. And that was between John Doe, Ravi, not for me to say, and over on Rumble, Scorpbrat05. So way to go, everybody. I wanted to highlight another comment that, I don't know, wanted to comment on myself. And it's from The Edge, says, y'all nutty over here. And I wanted to point out that, you know what? Thank you, because because I think one of the worst degrading comments is to be a normie now. Like, you guys are normal. I think that would be a hit. So I find it a compliment, and I think all of you viewers should see it as a compliment that we're not normal. We are nutty over here. And if you're watching this, if you're enjoying this, consider this, that it's good in today's world to be considered weird and different and nutty, because being normal is probably one of the worst things to hear in terms of a compliment. So consider that. All right, let's get into the dream bot. How about that? Here we go. And let's zoom in. And what we have is Mercury. It's the red arrows. Now, first of all, big picture, our dream bot represents the collective unconscious, people's dreams. It's all consolidated, so it represents what people are dreaming about. We know from dreams that it represents subconscious material. So according to Carl Jung, this list would represent what people are dreaming about the most. So either we're being influenced collectively, or we collectively see something coming. It's all relative, and it's all important to consider. Now, big picture, the collective unconscious is sort of deflated. I had to run it a couple times throughout the day, and several hours apart. Didn't budge. Just it's gone kaput, and this happens occasionally. Not sure where all the dreams ended up. There could be an error on one of the websites. But anyway, this happens occasionally. A big ol', just an overall less words that were brought in. And we have surge scores that are a lot lower. But nonetheless, we still have a dream bot. And the words realize, think, and heard, and say, all these are just Mercury words, communication. It's plain and simple. And then the blue arrows, there's only 4 of them, but it's important, I think. It's just initiating something. It's starting something. So I thought that was interesting. And look at this. These are linguistic sets. These can be important. What does this mean to you? Linguistic set number 1. Ran people, tall line giants. People, tall giants, all in the same grouping. I thought that was interesting. Then linguistic set number 2, order, say, telling, waiting area, cancel, play, movie. That might be too many words in this linguistic set. It might just be waiting area, cancel, play, movie. Some people say we're living in a simulation, in a play, in a movie. And get your popcorn out and watch. Time will tell. Hopefully they're right, because this world is getting insane. All right, so that's the dream bot. Now let's get into the astrology. We're on the last couple of days of March, so just that little sliver. And in that sliver off to the right, as we close out March, we're looking at Mars and Saturn coming into a trine, perfecting on the 30th. We also have Mars in conjunct Pluto. This is the one that we focused in on last week, where we called it Power is Falling, because both Mars and Pluto are in a fall in their new signs. And we also have Venus and relationships getting an overhaul with Uranus. So Venus conjunct Uranus, going precise or perfects in on the 30th. Now we go into April. Now we know we have the biggest event probably is going to be this new moon solar eclipse in Aries, and that happens on the 19th. But we also have this week, in the last day of our CIRF week on the 5th, we're going to have a full moon in Libra, as I mentioned before. Big picture changes. You can see most of the Most of the planets are going to be going direct all through April, except for Mercury. We're going to be going retrograde starting around the 21st, 22nd, that time frame. And we also have Venus switching signs from Taurus going into Gemini. So we have quite a bit of some greens. These are sextiles mostly. We have some trines and, still have a presence of some squares. We're going to have to deal with that. A couple of these are conjunctions, but all in all, the biggest things to look at are the big solar eclipse and probably Mercury retrograde. But this week, we're only looking at the full moon. We also have what I mentioned in that first slide. There's Mercury square Pluto right there. So we need to consider that. We also have Mercury. I didn't identify that. Silly me, but I'm identifying it now. Mercury switching from Aries into Taurus. That's a big move, and it's an energetic move for mental pressure, strain, conflict. Not necessarily Mercury in Taurus is causing that pressure. It's more in alignment with the square over to Pluto. But in that shift now, as it's going through this transformation, just causes extra influence on trying to stabilize. Remember, Taurus is that stabilized, reliable, dependable Taurus. Normally that does the same thing to the mind, which is stabilize it, slows it down, makes it more dependable. But in this case, we're going through a transformation of Mercury, and on top of that, going in a different sign. So that just adds to the complexity of the shift, the mental shift. And lo and behold, as we go down into Thursday the 30th, at around noon, these are Central Time, Central Daylight Savings Time, to be more exact. Here's what our chart shows. We start off with a T-square on Mercury, so we're already starting with a bang. Probably did not include that in the energy slide, which I'll show you later, about the significance of the overall mental pressure day by day. Probably a little higher on this day, Thursday the 30th. And then and it starts this square over to Pluto. So Pluto's busy working on transforming in Aquarius, and that's a very interesting phenomenon for Aquarians. Probably does give a really subconscious improvement in a sense of power and control. But anyway, it is causing an overhaul and a pressure to overhaul, pressure for death and rebirth to mind, as mind is rounding out the end of Aries, and just coming out of a real positive experience with Jupiter. That was a really positive thing, even though we were focusing last week on Mars in Cancer, which is sort of like the heavy blanket, the weighted blanket, kind of feeling everything's harder. Everything that you need to do takes longer. And so don't start those big new projects. But we still have that phenomenon happening. But this week, we're going to be focusing a lot more on Mercury, even though we still have that same problem with Mars in Cancer. Luckily, we have the moon has passed Mars and kind of leaving it alone now. Now it's just Mars in Cancer. Before, the past few days, it's been the moon disturbing with the fallen yang power. And so it just makes the water heavier and deeper as you try to move forward in life and do your tasks. But that'll be a little bit lighter for Mars, okay? Let's pause there and shift back over to Mercury in a T-square with the emotions and with the transformative Pluto. And so the focus on mental pressure begins today, Thursday the 30th, and it's going to grow from here because this square is going to get tighter as we go along. So pressure to think powerfully. This square represents a feeling like maybe a loss of control, like I need to gain control. What happens when people feel like they're out of control or life around them is out of control? Ding, ding, ding. Yes, correct answer. They begin to try to control everything or more things, or they give up and run away. But a lot of people will be trying to control a lot of things. You'll see a lot more control freaks this week. Okay. Great, because we have already seen plenty of them in past months. We also have the pressure of Mars and Sun, and Mars and Neptune. Both of those are still in play. So pressure with ego. So there still is that pressure to get stuff done, but now we've got a diluted yang aspect, and we've got the pressure over to Neptune, giving you illusions and false imagination and maybe achieving the wrong thing. So we've got that trickery going on as well. And then I want to point out both at 16 degrees of Taurus are Venus and Uranus. And so relationships getting an overhaul. But remember, Venus in Taurus is much more about value and worth. So what you value is changing. What, really that does go into our solution. So hammer this home, foot stomper, Venus over Uranus is part of our solution. It's going to force you to really analyze what is important to you. What are your values? What is your worth? Not net worth per se, more of a perceived worth of your complex of soul, mind, body, spirit, whatever, emotions, your ability to all carry those out, boots on the ground, getting stuff done. All that feeds into your sense of worth. Skill sets, knowledge might be in there, but that's careful because we're getting in more into Mercury. When we get into understanding and knowledge, there's another form of understanding. Remember the top word in the Dreambot was realized? On the surface, it's a very Mercury concept. And Mercury is struggling this week. The solution will be back to understanding, but more from an intuitive standpoint. No, I'm getting ahead of myself. But with Mercury kind of pressured and going through a transformation, we're still going to need another form of understanding. And that's what our focus on solution is going to be. Friday, the 31st, we have the power shifts. That's still in play. Mars and Pluto. And we're about 3 degrees out. 3 degrees from each other. Remember, we go out to 8 degrees orb. And this is an adjustment, so they're adjusting to each other as they both are in fall. It's considered fall. And fall in astrology means it's just not as easy. Well, Mars is already in Cancer, and it's already not easy. But now it's struggling with Pluto being not easy. And they're both bouncing this off of each other, and it kind of swirls downward. Just for this time period. Now, ironically, with that being said, we have a waxing gibbous moon in Leo. So this is the time period in the lunar cycle, and we are in that Aries moon lunar overall sequence, a 30-day cycle. And so your goals that you set at the onset of this new moon in Aries is still applicable. This is the time period to really consider moving towards those goals, even though we have the power is kind of falling and shifting. It's about little small steps moving forward towards your Aries goals for this time period. You can also, here's another advanced move. You can take the pressured energies. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 pressures here and maleficent pressures, right? So chaotic, and even talked about it in the summary slide. There's pressure, there's strain, inner conflict, mentally, and mental transformation. It feels out of control, but it also feels conflicted and so chaotic. You can take that chaotic energy And where your awareness goes, energy follows. So you can close your eyes in a meditation and imagine the energy and maybe in a specific place, maybe in your third eye, maybe in your heart, maybe on a chakra that is weak. And you can organize it there by just focusing on that energy. Or other people like myself, we do the highway of energy. And as I move my awareness around the body, that chaotic energy will start to organize. That's called the human battery. So now you capture that energy, okay, and you also organize it. Now you have extra energy that you can use towards your waxing gibbous moon in Leo, despite having all this conflict, despite having Mars in Cancer, despite having Pluto in Aquarius in a fall state. You can still get some stuff done. All right, now we transition into April. Welcome to April, everybody, and this is April Fool's Day. Let me get a sip. The focus here on April 1st is healing energies. The sun is entering in a conjunction with Chiron, the healer, and Jupiter, both of them. And so this, as Mercury transitions out of these Aries planets, what's left is Sun, Chiron, and Jupiter together in a very positive, expansive, wise type of healing. And then in Aries, which is self-preservation, drawing line in the sand, defending yourself, but healing, taking care of yourself. Not Aries, not really known for that. It's more of a Virgo thing. But this collective alignment here is a kind of a very powerful version of the Virgo self-care thing that you have an opportunity to capture. So while you're maybe conflicted or everyone else is extra controlling, you can have the option of just going to your safe space and imagining or tuning into this Jupiter, Chiron, Sun energy in Aries. So it's fire based as opposed to the Virgo grounded earthy base. So very powerful there if you want to tune into that. And that's not a April Fool's joke. That is a true alignment there, just happens to be on April Fool's. Let's see what else. I think that's about it. Now, all the other things that we talked about before are still in play. I'm not saying that you just focus on that. There's everything else we talked about as well. On Sunday, kind of a similar thing. The big focus on, halfway for Mars and Pluto to end this inconjunct and getting weaker, but still technically power is falling. Sun getting closer to both Chiron and Jupiter. And so from here on out, that you can tap into that healing energy for yourself. Heat, Aries, fire, expansiveness, Jupiter, healing qualities, Chiron, and then of course the sun is heat, hot. So if your ailment or disease or anything would be benefited by heat, this is the time to really meditate on that and focus in on it, especially while power is falling and working on regaining its equilibrium. All right, on Monday, this is 11:22 a.m. daylight savings time. Mercury is switching into Taurus. So in the mind, things do become more deliberate, slower to react, looking for meaning and worth and value in your thoughts, and how to be more dependable, how to be less distracted. Everything slows down for the mind. And so for some of us, this is a really good thing. so we don't have to think um, so I don't know, ADHD like, so distracted. It's going to be a lot higher focus, and focus on values and the Taurus things. And on the other extreme, you might get a lot more bullheaded, especially as things mentally start to feel more out of control. There's an interesting thing here because you've got bullheaded Taurus squared to a fixed sign of Aquarius. And so you have a very mentally not adaptable. So that just feeds into this pressure to adapt, which, feels like instead of adapting, you're just going to control everything. This is why it feels out of control for a lot of people. So there's a pressure to think catastrophically or powerfully, same kind of thing. Now, here's an interesting sextile that Mercury begins right at the onset of Taurus. So it's Mercury in Taurus sextile Saturn. Saturn being known as the guy who just keeps throwing us challenges and hardships and keeps increasing the bar. And it seems like he's laughing at us, and we're angry back at Saturn. But in reality, Saturn is not that kind of maleficent. It's like the old grandfather that knows what's best for you, that by encouraging you to pound through this obstacle, on the other side of that obstacle, you're going to get sharper, wiser, and you're going to need these skills for something later down the road. This is that alignment. But it doesn't make it feel any better. It still feels pressured, strain. You don't necessarily want to do this thing, but it's going to be part of the transformation for Mercury, and it's an opportunity. So lean into some difficult, especially some mental limitations. That's a good time to learn or whatever, tune into what Saturn really thinks the skill sets you need in this challenge, and hone on that as a positive outcome of the challenge instead of succumbing to it. Opportunity to limit thoughts. Saturn is also a planet of limitation. And so the opportunity could be to just limit your thoughts in general. Kind of talked about that, where Mercury normally is very adaptable and, ego and looking around and looking for threats and just always analyzing everything. Well, that kind of settles down, slows down in Taurus. And so that matches with Saturn as a limitation. There's an opportunity in limiting your thoughts. And it's also in the future. Mercury is conjunct with the North Node. So even though thoughts have slowed down, they're going to be looking forward into the future. And then we have a grand Earth trine on Tuesday, the 4th. We have the sun is really getting stronger with this expansive healing set with Jupiter and Chiron and Sun, as we sort of prepare for the full moon that's coming on the next day. So the grand Earth trine is built with growing opportunities, because one of the points is Venus, and Venus in Taurus is worth and value. And now there's an opportunity with Neptune and Venus in a sextile to imagine spiritual places, imagine more values, different values, more important, be able to prioritize as you're coming out of the big changes from Uranus. The moon's there. Moon is discretionary in Virgo. And of course, there's Pluto. So in a fall, but Pluto is that subconscious power. So there's a growing power there, a moment of clarity and practical things of importance. Grand trine. Practical connections. It's very utilitarian alignment here. And it is the Virgo waxing gibbous moon in a late stage just before the full moon is a time, kind of a last chance to get all your stuff done for that Aries cycle that we mentioned earlier. And then we head into our full pink moon at 16 degrees 7 minutes of Libra at 11:34 p.m. daylight savings time. And God, I hope that there are no clouds. There's just been so many clouds lately. Seems like I haven't seen the night sky in forever. All right, so what do we have here? We have the healing modality, Sun sitting in between Chiron and Jupiter. So very expansive, very positive, very healing qualities, all shining from the Sun directly across the zodiac to the moon in Libra. And so people yearning for peace and balance, harmony, and beauty. But I think a lot of people, especially with the loss of control to mental pressure and strain, inner conflict, is looking for justice. Justice. All right, now we have a lot of other alignments with the full moon. You've got the inconjunct over to Uranus and the Venus. And this is very transformative for relationships, especially relationships, your ability to relate to others. And this, by the way, is it's a very Libra thing as well. Libra is ruled by Venus, and Taurus is ruled by Venus, and both have different lenses that Venus looks through, but relationships are adapting at this point. This is expansive, higher wisdom is brightly cast upon the full moon. Okay, a lot more alignments. We even have, okay, look at this, Venus trine Pluto. So now Venus is she just got done finishing over Uranus. So big old changes with everything Venus, and now going through an overhaul, transformation. So it's a very transformative time for relationships. In addition, you have a full moon, which generally brings up unpredictable emotions and behaviors in people. And around Libra things. So everything we just mentioned, justice and harmony and balance, all the interpersonal dynamics are being overhauled and unpredictable. So don't think this is just good for all things Libra. This is a transformational time for relationships, especially. And when we talk about how people relate to each other, there's a lot of changes there and upheavals. There's going to be that sense of the opposite of, if they're yearning for peace and balance and harmony, that might mean that they're actually feeling the inner conflict interpersonally underneath that. But it's going to be a really amazing full moon, and lots of healing qualities and a lot of wisdom in that full moon. So let's get started getting towards the solution. But first, we got some I-Ching reading to finish off. The I-Ching says conflict. Right? A conflict often arises when a person who is convinced that he or she is entitled to something meets with opposition. And if mind is pressured away from what it wants or pressured towards threats, it will feel this as well. So line 1 says disputes and a dangerously charged atmosphere seem likely, but the storm will blow over if you remain careful. Line 4 says, remember that all conflict, no matter how much the odds may favor you, carries a price, whether you win or not. Things to think about. And then here's our overall energy chart. So on this one, I need to darken it up again. We have the red line. This is the mental pressure. And of course, we have the Libra full moon and justice coming up, spiking right there at the end of our CIRF week. But all week, this is where I was talking about the T-square on Thursday. Probably should be a little higher and then dips, but it does increase as Mercury square Pluto gets tighter and tighter. And that climaxes on Tuesday, and in there is the Taurus transition, making things a little more difficult, and some other aptitudes. But bigger energies are at the beginning of next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Bigger energies in there. There you have it. So let's summarize the influence, and then we can move on to the solution. There you have it, folks. There's the mental pressure, and the alignments and transits this week will additively cause an overhaul in cognitive processes, changes in perceptive ability, an increase in doubt of behavioral capacity for achievement, big changes in relational dynamics. We spent a couple days on that. And as a result, cause inner conflict and clouded judgment. All this increases in strength leading up to the Libra full moon, where people are greatly yearning for peace and harmony and justice. The yearning in itself may cause more unpredictability, as the full moon does as well, and an ironic shift towards loss of control. All right, with that, sounds very negative again. It is what it is. Let's move on to the solution. So it's one thing to know what to look for energetically. Let me go back. It's another thing to know how to react to that. The secret to life is in your reactions. So now that you know what you're looking for in terms of emotion and feelings and perceptions, this is the start of our solution matrix. So we have 61, centering in truth. Centering in truth involves becoming conscious of the relationship between your heart and the circumstances of your life. This requires connecting to the fundamental wisdom that is within you. Truth becomes power when you let go of prejudice. If you waver in upholding your principles, you will be tested. Yet when you are firm and strong, the power of truth can break through even the most stubborn minds, including your own. You're going to have a lot of stubborn minds, especially as Mercury goes into Taurus. In a debate, the power to perceive the truth in another's position is essential to winning the contest. This is going to be part of our advanced solution, the power of shedding light on universal truths. All right, the biggest energy undoubtedly this week is at the very end, and it's the full moon in Libra. That puts us in gate 57 of the Rave Mandala, and it gives us the gift of Sidereal Virgo. So we start with the Rave. It says the gentle, the extraordinary power of clarity. As I read this, if you have remembered the I-Ching reading, you will remember this is almost verbatim. It's the cleansing. Line 2 says, the clarity to establish proper values and ideals must be accompanied by resolute determination to maintain them. Perfect cleansing through inner realization. Do you remember what the top word in the Dreambot was? Realize. So it was pointing directly to the Rave, the possibility for proper values and ideals through intuition, the deeper part of you. And that's the deeper understanding that I was mentioning earlier. All right, so we ready for the solution slide? Let's do this. All right, I think we're set. And you can see right in the middle of our triangulation is our new surprise. We're going to be heading into the runes I don't consider myself an expert in runes, but I've decided to put those into my beard each week, and I want to have the rune that typifies the central theme of the triangulation. I want the rune to be right there. I want the solution to be in my beard as I walk around, boldly displaying, boldly behaving, reminding myself to behave in this manner. So I wouldn't say that I am a rune expert. I think over time, maybe I will as I study these. But you can go along with this or not. But let's first back out and let's talk about the triangulation itself. We have two pieces. The I-Ching and the Rave are two different gates, two different I-Ching hexagrams, but they're almost identical in the result. So connect with your inner wisdom, the extraordinary power of clarity. It's the same thing. Hold very firm to your values. Well, the Rave says establishing proper values and ideals accompanied by resolute determination to maintain them. So it's a verbatim, got two definite overlaps. And then you have Sidereal Virgo. So here's our triangulation. And you can maybe see why we're using Laguz as our rune. And again, we have identical overlaps between the I-Ching solution and the Rave. The gift of honoring both will be a strong sense of inner peace. This is the result that you're going to get when you do this solution, right? You should start to feel inner peace, confidence in your intuitive clarity or inner knowing, and an overall lack of fear or anxiety based on either the unknown or this mental conflict or whatever. So connect to your inner wisdom and establish firm commitment to your highest values and ideals. These values is a very personal thing. These are not what the collective tells you is your highest value. It's not what your parents always told you is your highest value. We here in the CIRF community, we're helping you individually to be your best self. And part of that is to be able to identify what are your highest values? What are your highest ideals? No matter what you've been told in life, no matter what knowledge you've been given, what's important to you? And that's what you want to identify this week. Make these your only or main two goals this week. That is, connect to your higher wisdom and establish a firm commitment to your highest values and ideals. Those two things. And you want to habituate the process. And by that, we mean you don't want to do it just a couple of times and then say, oh, good, I have my values listed here and I have them prioritized. Yay, me. I know what's important to me. That is important. But what you want to do is, figuratively get them onto like glasses where you can't see the world without looking through your values. That's kind of what you're doing by habituating the process. You're going to make your values and your inner wisdom and that connection habituated. Okay. All right. Now, part of this process, and by habituate, I mean do it consistently. I'll talk a little bit later about how to do that. You are also afforded the Sidereal Virgo archetype to help you be responsible and practical in this journey. However, remember that the cleansing, centering in truth opportunity is a pragmatic, ritualistic, behavioral one, not a mental one. Remember where mind is right now. It's going through an overhaul, right? And it's feeling a lot of pressure and inner conflict. So being mental is probably not the best place to be overall this week. It's about deep down inside your heart, in your intuitive body. That's where you want your inner knowing. That's where you want to be connected to. Because there, when you're connected to there and you're true to your highest values, there really is no fear, anxiety. catch yourself thinking too much about this process and get back to the behaviors and rituals that help you center in your values and truth and habituate them. I know I'm saying the word habituate a lot. This is going to be a daily ritual, maybe not, maybe an hourly ritual. If you really want to get those glasses etched out with your values in them so that you are naturally, habitually, subconsciously seeing through those lenses, it'll make your world different. And so the part of the rituals will be to maybe list out your values. If you have, say, 5, 6, 10 main values, make sure they're prioritized. You might want to focus on just the top 3. And you want to meditate on those values, and you want your mind to be seeing every scenario, seeing every mind wandering session from the perspective of those values. What does it mean for your values? What part of those values are important? Subsets of those values. Also, you can just, in your self-talk, as you're walking around, maybe attending to your garden or making your food or driving to your work, you can just be saying your 3 highest values over and over again. That's how you habituate to them. Then it's one thing to have those in your habit formed in your brain into your subconscious. It's another thing to be acting behaviorally to push those values forward. We call that in ACT therapy, we call it committed action. To be committed to those values, and you demonstrate that through practical behaviors in your real life. So that's how you habituate your values, is you do something in accordance with those values behaviorally. All right, so the quote or the affirmation that I'd like to use this week is, my reality unfolds in accordance with my strongest habituated behaviors. I am a human becoming. I am a human becoming. And I'm becoming through a connection to my inner wisdom. And I'm habituating my highest values and ideals, and I'm seeing that playing out through my self-observer, my objective, non-judgmental observer, to see whether or not my values are accurately being demonstrated out in the real world. Don't want to be a hypocrite. I want to be a human becoming. And through that process, then, I'm going to switch out my rune, my beard rune, with Laguz. And this one is the sign of water. There's another rune. See if I can find that pretty quick. You have the option of using this other rune, but it's called Onsus. Again, I'm not a rune expert. I'm just learning about it. And I'm wearing the runes, so I want to know what I'm wearing. That's the neat thing about divination, is you can put out all your runes and then close your eyes and sort of feel the energy of them and pick one. And that's kind of a reading for yourself. Some people use runes that way, and that's effective. But in this manner, it's a solution. So I'm finding the Laguz in the 24 runes, and I'm putting that in my beard as a reminder for myself. I'm wearing that energy so that I'm remembering to and forcing my mind to keep concentrating on it and behaving like the Laguz, which is water. And water is also like the water in astrology. It's the depth. It's the centering wisdom beneath. So part of this water is going really deep into the being and connecting with that really deep wisdom. That's the Laguz. Okay. So I think that's all I have. I can't remember anything else that I've forgotten, but oh, maybe I should read a little bit of the Laguz. That's what I was going to do. So, as the rune of water, Laguz is also the rune of intuition and subconscious. You may be getting a lot of intuitive hits from your inner self right now. Be sure to follow your gut, even if your brain is telling you something different. Laguz indicates psychic ability, which can be nurtured and strengthened with practice. There you go. Stay open and receptive to the messages coming in from the spirit world and your higher self. There you go, Laguz. And the other one was Ansus. It's sometimes used as a connection to higher wisdom. So the other realms, the spirit world, getting information from the universe. But here's the issue I have with that, with using Ansus, is that its keywords are wisdom, divine power, but it's also the messenger and communication. So it's very much like kind of Mercury, and I think it uses a lot more of the mental mind, and we want to kind of get away from that. The Ansus, just so you know, looks just like Laguz, but with one more line down from the other line. So it looks like more of an F. But I'm not going to use the Ansus because I think it's a lot more Mercury kind of. And we know what Mercury's going through, the pressure, the conflict. I don't want more thinking. I want less mental thinking and more internal knowing. And that's Laguz, the water. All right. You take care, everybody. And be well. Take good care of yourselves. And stay with high energy. We will see you next week. Cheers.